So I want to introduce Alex Linser, who's the chairman of the Hamilton County Democratic Party, and Zophia Pittman. And we asked for a couple questions when you probably signed up for the session tonight. So we have those questions, but if we have time at the end, we'll take sessions from the group. So let me pass the mic down. So the first question is to Zophia. Zophia was just hired on January the 1st as the executive director of the Hamilton County Democratic Party. So what exactly do you do as being the executive director?
Hi guys, and thank you for having me. It's so great to be here. What a question that is. It's a lot. Well, first of all, I get to work with Greg, which is great, and all the volunteers and help coordinate with them, any sort of projects that we have. I manage our money. We have several different bank accounts, and we have different types of donations that are only allowed in certain accounts. So I have to manage and track all of that. Recently, we just endorsed all of our judicial candidates and our non-judicial candidates, and that was a really long process that I helped facilitate. And now that we have them, I'm managing communicating with them, all their campaign managers, getting them connected to people that they need, like the unions and any sort of other resources that they need. Communication is like one of the hugest parts of my job. Communicating with Dem clubs, communicating with ward chairs. Another huge project is the Spring Gala, which is our big fundraiser, and I'm the lead on that. We're at a new location this time. It's going to be bigger and better. Speaker coming out soon, so subscribe for our newsletter, and we'll announce it there. Drum roll, please. Yeah. Yeah, I'm also still learning a lot of my responsibilities, so that's great too. I'm kind of Alex's chief of staff, so I manage his calendar as well, scheduling. I'm a liaison between him and everyone else, and any random projects that Alex has for me at any time, I will do. So I'm sure there's more, but for now.
So tell us a little bit about where you worked before this, like the report of elections, things like that.
Yeah. So I'm from Dayton originally, but I came here for school. I went to the University of Cincinnati, and I majored in political science and international affairs. My first job out of college was working on a judicial campaign for the party, so that's kind of how I got involved in all of this. And then after that, I worked for several judges at the local courthouse. I worked for Judge Lubers, Judge Hathaway, and Judge French. So that was a fantastic experience to get to work in the courthouse and meet all of those folks. And then from there, I got to work at the Board of Elections with Alex for several years, where I managed communications, community engagement, and our early vote center. So if you guys ever came out to vote early, I was help managing that operation, which is quite the operation. So yeah, I got to manage the website there, communications, and we started the voter engagement program, which has been really important just to connect with people and inform them about their voting rights, especially when there are a lot of changes from the secretary that we have to educate people about. So yeah, I love my work with the board, but I'm very lucky to work with Alex and all you now here. So thank you for having me.
Sure. And Alex, what do you do as the chairman of the party?
Yeah, well, also, again, thank you all for having me. Thank you for coming out on this snowy night, and I think kudos to our city employees who have kept the roads clear today. I was getting nervous, but the roads were never really that bad at all today. As party chair, it's my job to affect the will of our central and executive committees. And what does that mean? Well, we are organized to win elections for Democrats. And our executive committee decides when and who we endorse. And when they endorse a candidate, it's my job to put together a team that will run a campaign that will help those candidates run winning elections. Behind that, we sort of split our responsibilities into 4 buckets. First, and probably most time-consuming and hardest, is fundraising. Just so you know, the party, it depends on what kind of year it is, and is it a gubernatorial, presidential, city council? Last year, the party brought in about $500,000. Of that $500,000, $380,000 went to campaigns, and another $120,000 went to sustaining our staff and our offices and some charitable contributions. So it's a lot of money to raise every year. In addition to fundraising, we have candidate recruitment. And when I say candidate recruitment, I don't mean doing the work of who's going to run for what this year. What I mean is, are we cultivating young people in their careers so that 5-10 years from down the road, they will be ready to run for office? Are we getting people in the pipeline? Whenever someone comes to me and says, I want to get involved with politics, I want to run for office someday, I tell them they need to do 2 things. The first is they need to show up at their local Democratic club meeting so that they can meet the people in their neighborhood who are doing this work already. And the second is they should find a campaign that's a candidate that they like, and they should help them get elected. They should go volunteer for them, knock on their doors, and then they get a first-hand look at what it's like to run a campaign. So we talk about candidate recruitment. That's about long-term pipeline building, making sure the party has people who are well-qualified and ready to run when the time comes. Then there's the party's communications. So you'll see me on our social media. I do a lot of direct-to-video. I've tried to sort of change the look of our social media over the last year since I've been elected chair, where, oh, thank you, I appreciate that. I view our social media as, I'm talking to the Democratic family, right? Because the nature of the algorithms are nowadays, you get shown the content that you are more likely to align with. And so I spend a lot of my time talking about, not just like current events or things that are happening in the news, but how the party works behind the scenes and trying to sort of demystify that process. So I've tried to sort of strip it down and make it just more, less formal, more just sort of me talking directly to the camera. But then there's also the sort of traditional media element of communications where from time to time there will be things that are happening that I need to put out a statement on, or I might have to be interviewed by the press. Example of that was there was a Republican candidate for school board in Anderson Township last cycle, and she was caught several times hosting underage drinking parties at her house. And to me, that was disqualifying for a candidate for school board. And so I put out a press statement, and I called up the local stations, and I said, the voters need to know that this is in this person's background and it's disqualifying, and if she can't keep the children in her own home safe, she has no business being on the school board. She ended up dropping out of the race after that. And so that's the kind of thing, the kind of communications that the party chair has to be a part of. Sometimes it's on me to be kind of the bully, because I'm not an elected official, right? So if somebody needs to throw a punch, it's a little easier for me to do it than somebody who has an official job and has to worry about the crosswinds there. And then, we talked about fundraising, we talked about candidate recruitment, we talked about communications. The last bit is growing the party, and we call that volunteer engagement and membership. The party runs on volunteer power, and we can't do any of what we do without that. The other side, the other side has all these resources at their disposal. They can raise money at factors well beyond what we're capable of raising money. They don't have the grassroots infrastructure that we have. Our strength is on the ground. But it really takes cultivating that. And so we are trying to focus on cultivating our Democratic clubs. Because I think if you can build community that's based in a locality, that's how you keep volunteers coming back month after month after month. Too often we see volunteers recruited for one campaign and then we lose track of them for a while, but where there is a good active ward chair who hosts a meeting on a regular basis at a place like this, when people show up on a regular basis, then we start to form relationships with those folks, and we know we can rely on them when we need them to knock doors or write postcards or you stand outside the polls on election day. And of course, a big part of that pipeline is then becoming a precinct executive, which there are several other questions about that. So I'll stop talking about what party chair does now, and we can move down the list.
So one of the things, just a quick follow-up, so one of the things, I see a lot of new faces in the audience that I haven't seen before. So if you want to get involved more in the Democratic neighborhood clubs, how would they go about doing this? How do they let us know about that?
So if you want to get involved with your local club, you can go to our website, and on our calendar we have a list of where the clubs are and when they meet. If there's not a Democratic club in your neighborhood, then maybe you could start one. And my card's in the back, my email address, you can always reach out. We can talk about what that looks like. I'm very excited. We just launched a Clifton Democratic Club this year, and they've gone from 3 people to 50 people in the course of a year, which is great. There's a good club that meets here with Harriet. And so where we have those clubs active, that's where the party is the strongest. And so I want to make sure we've got a club that covers every neighborhood.
So we also have, I think, 3 organizations that call themselves Democrats. So we have the National Democratic Party, the Ohio Democratic Party, and then the Hamilton County Democratic Party. So just in a Reader's Digest version here, because we'll be here all night, but can you explain to us what the difference is, what the different roles for each one of those organizations is?
Yeah. So as a county Democratic Party, we are a chartered chapter of the Ohio Democratic Party. The Ohio Democratic Party is a chartered chapter of the Democratic National Committee. So it's a pyramid, and we're at the bottom of it, and that means that the Democratic Party, the DNC, issues a set of rules and bylaws that apply all the way down. Then ODP has to follow their rules, and the ODP issues a set of rules that apply all the way down, so we have to follow ODP's rules, and then we, of course, have our own bylaws and constitution. And so there's sort of a tiered authority list where the DNC's rules are first, then ODP, and ours. Fundamentally, the difference between those organizations is which offices they are endorsing for. So the DNC deals with national elections. They are also a substantial funder of what we do. So for better or worse, the DNC has the big national microphone. It's a lot easier for them to raise money. We get emails from them probably 3 times a day. But the thing about those emails is if you send out 1 million emails and 1% of people click on the link, that's a lot of money that comes in. And so the DNC will then strategically target races throughout the country and send resources down through the state party and eventually to us. So you can think of it the same way with the state party. They endorse all the candidates at the statewide level and U.S. Congress. And it's our job to take care of everybody at the county level or the state house. Now, I guess there's another layer to that, which is the local offices in the odd years when we have city council members, township trustees, school board members. That's when we even go even more granular than that, where just our committee members from the city of Cincinnati vote on who our candidates will be for Cincinnati City Council. Just our central committee members from Blue Ash vote on who the candidates will be for Blue Ash City Council. So it's one big pyramid that really starts on the local club ward level and works its way all the way up to the DNC. For the most part, the way it should work, the DNC has all the money and they flow it down to us. Doesn't always trickle to Hamilton County, but I think we are on the map again. We fell off the map after 2016. That was the last time we saw big national investment in this area. And since then, the conventional wisdom has been that Ohio is red and not worth investing in. That I believe that sentiment is changing, and I think we're going to see substantial investment this year.
So when I've gone out to canvass, one of the objections that I hear when I knock on doors is that, you only come around when election time is up. I don't hear from you any other time of the year. So how are you going to engage voters in Hamilton County this year? How are you going to do it differently than in past years? Or are you going to do it at all?
I would just leave them be, right? It'll be fine. That's a tough challenge. On the one hand, if I'm being honest, when people say that to me, it's like, we run elections. Like we're trying to win the election. That's why we're here. But on the other hand, I do get that. It's something that I have tried to impart on our elected officials, that they need to think about their terms, not just in terms of when they're up for re-election, but they should go to 2 or 3 community council meetings a month. And if you do that over the course of a 4-year term, you'll make your way around to a lot of different neighborhoods, and it'll help you get real feedback from people about what they're seeing. And I think we're seeing more buy-in on that kind of philosophy. The other thing that I'm really big on is voter registration. And in Hamilton County, because we have had a very aggressive voter purge in Ohio, we are short about 40,000 registered voters based on the census data of how many eligible voters there are in Hamilton County. So what I would like to see as the party's going to reorganize this year, we're going to have a new set of ward chairs, precinct executives. I would like to task those ward chairs with helping us build a dispersed voter registration operation. And each ward chair is going to know their neighborhood a little better than I do, right? Where are the places that we need to be registering voters? I think you opened the question talking about door knocking. Ever since the Obama administration, door knocking has been orthodoxy in politics. It was viewed as the most effective campaign strategy. I have seen data, and I genuinely believe, just based on my own experience, we're starting to see that change. We're starting to see diminishing returns. People rarely answer their doors when strangers knock on it anymore. And when they do answer their door, they're anxious and they're defensive and they're not in a place to it's just not that common. And we can talk about what's changing in society that makes that happen, but the bottom line is it's not as effective of a tool as it once was. And so our party needs to be a little bit more innovative. And we have to use all the tools in our toolbox, including reaching out digitally and in the mail. But so I do believe, though, that if we can find places where somebody is already making community, so whether that's church festivals or 4th of July parades or things, wherever there are crowds gathering for some community event, the Democratic Party should be there. They should be wearing T-shirts letting people know that they are the Democratic Party, and we should be registering voters and helping people understand what's at stake in the election.
So personally, I think one of the elected officials that do a really good job of voter outreach is Alicia Reese with her 513 bus. I think she does a great job with that. So yeah, it's part of the county commission and that's part of the budget, but I think she does a great job of just reaching out to voters and doing more than just helping people, with their issues with the county. So anyway, that's my editorial. In all transparency, Alex and Zophia were here at our neighborhood den club meeting, and Alex was talking about how Hamilton County is expected to run up the vote for statewide elections, like for Sherrod Brown and the governor and things like that for Amy Acton. So this year, how are you expecting to run up the vote in Hamilton County? How are you going to turn out more voters?
So what Greg means by run up the score is, we're in a lucky position now to be a Democratic stronghold. In 2024, turnout in Cuyahoga County, where Cleveland is, was 63%. In Columbus, Franklin County, it was 65%. And in Hamilton County, it was 68%. Sherrod Brown said to me, if every county looked like Hamilton County, I would have won the election. And I was like, respectfully, Senator, that was not a good number for us. We're normally 73, 74% turnout. And, I think there's been a lot of postmortems on the 2024 election. But the bottom line is we got to do better if we're going to make sure we get Amy Acton shared across the board this time. And so I was elected party chair actually a year ago. This is like the year anniversary was on Sunday. So one of the things that I was hyper-focused on last year was how can we use the city council elections as sort of a test of what we can try next year. And historically, we've run these coordinated campaigns in Hamilton County. They've been very successful. Everybody gets together, everybody chips in. We buy slate cards that have everybody's name and picture on them, and we go door to door, and our message is always like, vote for all the Democrats. Here's the slate. Don't forget who the judges are. Make sure you fill out the whole ballot and vote for all these people. That's always been really successful, but we've always limited our reach to what we call in the business, we call them triple Ds, right? So that's a Democrat who's voted in the Democratic primary in the last 3 elections. It's a very reliable voter that we know is going to turn out to vote. The strategy has always been consolidate the base, make sure that they know who the Democrats are. Last year, in the local races, I said to our team, like, we need to expand the universe of people that we're talking to. And so we created two universes. Our traditional universe of voters, which is people who we know are reliable Democrats. We just need that sample ballot, and they will vote for the Democrats. And then we looked for people who were maybe just outside of that universe. So maybe they voted in 2023, but not 2021, or vice versa. And for whatever reason, they're not showing up to vote at every election. Maybe they're not necessarily even voting for our folks. But let's talk to them. And we developed what we called a persuasion motivation campaign. So it wasn't just, don't forget to vote, right? It was, here's why it's important for you to vote. Here's the stakes. Here are the issues that are on the ballot in this election. And so a lot of these people were voters who had come out in 2023 to vote to protect abortion rights or to vote in favor of adult use marijuana. So we said, hey, you voted for those things. Republicans are still messing with our abortion rights, right? Republicans are still trying to walk back those marijuana reforms that you passed. If you want to defend those rights, we need you to come out and vote again. Thank you for voting last time. Please come out again. And I wasn't sure how that was going to work because historically the consultants will tell you that those voters are really hard to motivate. You need to knock on their doors multiple times. Da, 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 da. We did a pretty robust mail and digital campaign to them. And the nice thing about city council elections is, you know, there were parts of the county where we had full slates and we had well-funded campaigns, and there were parts of the county where we didn't have anything. And after the election, when we, you know, dissected what happened, we found that that communication, where we deployed it, increased voter participation by 15% among those unlikely voters. That's a really big number. So that was an experiment. It worked with flying colors. And so we're going to try to replicate it this year now countywide to make sure that we're not just talking to the same people over and over again, but we're expanding the people that we're communicating with.
So recently, I don't know how many people in the room have seen there's a grassroots organization that's trying to recruit precinct execs for the Hamilton County Democratic Party. And they're looking for, I'm using air quotes here, progressive precinct execs. So a two-part question here. Why do you think that they feel the need to go and recruit precinct execs? And what do you think about that recruitment effort?
Well, let me just say generally, I have never seen so much interest in running for precinct executive before. Fundamentally, that's a great thing. I made a video back in July, and I said that I had a three-point plan to take over or to fix the Democratic Party. Step one was build a firewall, and by that I meant we need to win elections last November and elect local officials who will build a firewall to protect our community from Trump. Step two was take over the Democratic Party, and I said what we need people to run for precinct executive. And there's an organized group that's recruiting. There's a lot of organic interest in precinct executive coming. I mean, I've had people reach out apropos of nothing at all and asked about this for the first time. And of course, as chair, this was a priority of mine, and I've put a lot of effort in making sure we're filling our gaps. So, you know, what I see, Democrats are pissed. I mean, and I'm pissed. You should all be pissed. I mean, we're
screaming that.
We're all, and so that energy has people saying, I want to do more than what I've been doing. And fundamentally, that is a fantastic thing for November. You know, where we have somebody serving as a precinct executive and they're doing a great job and they're doing the work, I hate to see them catch a challenge. But at the end of the day, what I see right now is energy and more people wanting to be a part of the movement. And I think that will only make us stronger. We're going to have a lot of contested precinct executive races. I've never seen this much interest before. That's fine. I hope that the people who are in those races will talk to their opponents and say, hey, if you win, I'll help you. If I win, you help me. And that at the end of it, we can all come back together, because the work we have to do together in Ohio this year is too important for us to be fractured. So, it's coming from all corners of the county. We've got a ton of interest in it, and at the end of the day, I think we'll be stronger for it.
Who votes for precinct executives?
So the precinct executives are elected in the primary election, and they are elected by the people in each precinct. So I live in Mount Washington.
So my ballot will have, if somebody's running in my.
Yeah. And if you're interested, before we leave tonight, the filing deadline is tomorrow.
I know the person who is there now.
Okay, okay.
I don't know if he's being challenged.
And it doesn't say precinct exec, it says central committee.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Yeah, the official legal title is member of central committee. We call them precinct execs here.
Is it listed if there's no challenger? It's automatic, or is it still on the ballot?
As long as they receive one vote, if they're unchallenged, then they will be elected.
Write yourself in if you want to run.
I just wondered.
That is true.
I never caught my eye.
It's all the way at the bottom of the ballot, and but most of the time these races are uneventful. Most of the time they're uncontested. It's going to, like I said, there's just been a lot of energy around it. And at the end of the day, I think that'll make us stronger.
What did I do? Precinct.
Oh, great question. What does a precinct executive do? Precinct executive, think about it as the boots on the ground for the party at the fundamental neighborhood level. So a precinct is just, the lines are, I don't want to say arbitrary, but essentially the Board of Elections is tasked with dividing the county into precincts of less than 1,400 voters. So they try to keep the sweet spot around 1,000 voters per precinct. Geography and density all play a factor in this. But so that precinct executive is responsible for those 1,000 voters, making sure that they canvass in their neighborhood and pass out the Democratic ticket, making sure that they work outside the polls on their neighborhood. Where we have, I started talking at the beginning about the importance of Democratic clubs. We have really strong Democratic clubs. There's a ward chair that convenes all the precinct executives together, along with other people from the neighborhood who want to volunteer, and they coordinate their efforts so that they're not doing it alone, which is really helpful. But they are, every neighborhood is a little different. Some neighborhoods are very heavy on the apartment buildings, so those are a little harder to canvass. Other neighborhoods, people are more spread out, so you got to drive it instead of walk it. But it's their job to sort of be the party's representative on the ground in their neighborhood. The other thing they do is they serve on what's called our central committee. Central committee makes a lot of important decisions. Big one is they elect party leadership. So that's the body that elected me. And they do that at the reorganizational meeting, which happens after the May primary election. But then also, if a candidate endorsed by the Democratic Party who is elected into office were to resign or die when they are in office, the Central Committee will replace that person. You all might remember in recent history when Bridget Kelly passed away, we had to convene the Central Committee to appoint her replacement as county auditor. Same happened when Todd Portune passed away a few years before that. That's a really important aspect of it. And then we use them for all kinds of other things. So I recruit precinct executives to serve on the party's committees. When I started talking about the sort of four core aspects of my responsibilities: communications, candidate development, fundraising, and volunteer engagement, there's committees that do that work. I don't do that alone. Zophia and I support committee chairs who sort of make that their mission. Precinct executives who want to be part of those committees, I appoint them to those committees. We also use precinct executives on our nominating committees. So those are the committees that interview people who want to seek the party's endorsement. And they partake in those interviews and they make a recommendation to our executive committee about endorsements. So I always say that jobs in politics are about what you make of them. People who put in a lot of effort and do a lot of work end up with a lot of political influence, right? The people who do the bare minimum and just sort of sit back, and we don't hear from that often, that can be a little frustrating. So It's good to see some energy and some people that come in.
So I'm a precinct exec in that area, and the reason that I ran was because the precinct exec that was in my area, I never saw them. One of the candidates came around and offered me a absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot, and asked if I needed anything else. They asked if I needed a slate card to know who to vote for in the judicial races, because I had never met anyone. That was before I got involved in the Democratic Party. So I thought, well, this is the way it should be, is that people are coming around trying to help you learn how to operate and vote and know who the candidates are. So that's why I ran. So if you've never met your precinct exec, I think that's one of the things that you should consider, kind of reaching out. So anyway, again, my editorial comment, sorry. So we just went through an endorsement process. We talked about that for countywide judicial races, but then we had a no endorsement vote for one of the county commissioner races. So can you explain how the endorsement process works and why we had the no vote in the county commissioner race?
Yeah. So this is how the party does endorsements. This process is laid out in our bylaws. I started talking about it a minute ago. We convene a nominating committee. The nominating committee is made up of either precinct executives or members of our executive committee, which is board chairs, elected officials, and some other key activists that represent other organizations that, it might be faith leaders, or it might be LGBTQ activists, or just to make sure, labor leaders, just make sure we're rounded out. We try our best to convene a committee that has both subject matter expertise for the races that they're working on, but then also is a diverse committee that reflects the broad tent that is the Democratic Party. Those committees are usually between 9 and 15 people. The reason it falls off is committee is a lot of work. And so I always say, as long as we've got 9, we've got a decent group, but I try to keep them a little bigger, try to keep them at like 15. Every once in a while you lose somebody just because it's very time intensive. So what the committee does is they develop a questionnaire. And we have a few questions that are sort of default questions that we put on questionnaires, but the committee is really tasked with determining what questions we're going to ask candidates to determine whether or not we want to make sure they have democratic values, we want to make sure they have good qualifications, and then we want to make sure that they are ready to run as part of a team. And the candidates all we put out a very public call for candidates in December, said, hey, here are all the offices that are up for election next year. The party's seeking people to run for office in those elections. And by the way, I listed everything on that document, whether there was an incumbent there or not. So then our committee sends those questionnaires out, candidates fill them out, send them back. The committee members take their time reading all over the questionnaires. We then bring every one of those candidates in for interviews. That is a really long day. In the case of the Judicial Committee this year, they had to interview 22 people for 15 judicial spots. And it took them 2 whole days to get through it all. Our state and county level nominating committee, they did it all in one day, but they lock themselves in a room for the better part of the day, and the candidates come in one by one and interview. Then the committee deliberates, and those deliberations are the committees that worked this year both had really hard, thoughtful, hard decisions to make, and they had really thoughtful deliberations. We do keep that process confidential. The reason for that is these candidates disclose to us a great deal of personal information, including what vulnerabilities they have as candidates, like what's in their personal history that could be a liability, and also their campaign strategy. They share that with us, and so we do keep those deliberations confidential. But ultimately, the committee votes to make a recommendation to the executive committee. And the executive committee hears that report from the nominating committee, but ultimately the executive committee are the deciders. And so the second part of your question was about the county commissioner race. And this year we have incumbent county commissioner Stephanie Dumas is up for re-election. and she is running for re-election. She has been endorsed by the party. She was endorsed by the party for re-election the last time she ran in 2022. Prior to that, she had won a primary against a candidate who was endorsed by the party. And so by winning that primary, she became the party's endorsed candidate in 2018, and she won for the first time. She interviewed along with Mika Owens, who's a Cincinnati City Council member. They both sought the endorsement. They both interviewed with the nominating committee. The nominating committee ultimately decided that it would recommend endorsing the incumbent, Stephanie Summerall Dumas. It's hard for me to say to you why the committee did what it did, because it's a group of people, and they all voted the way they voted for their own reasons, right? But I can tell you that their discussion focused very much on what is the value of incumbency, and really it was almost a burden of proof discussion. If the incumbent has had the endorsement and been endorsed in the past, what needs to happen in order for the incumbent to lose that? That was the way they approached it. When that recommendation hit the floor of the executive committee, which is the broader body that I described earlier, it's made up of elected officials, board chairs, and certain key other leaders in the party that are part of our constituencies, the discussion kind of switched almost to the opposite frame. Instead of the endorsement is something that an incumbent has to lose, to a discussion of maybe the party should keep its hands off of these. Like we're having a big discussion nationally as a party about whether or when we should be involved in primaries. And ultimately, the sentiment of no endorsement won the day in that room. It was a vote. The vote total was 61 votes for no endorsement, 25 votes for the endorsement. So that leaves the party officially neutral in that primary. And so what that means for me, as party chair, is we're going to give both candidates, both of these candidates have been endorsed by the party before for various offices. We're going to both candidates access to Vote Builder, our data tool. We're going to welcome both candidates at Democratic Club meetings, and we're going to encourage our Democratic clubs to have them, and so that their members can hear from both candidates and make up their minds. But on all of our official communications, we'll say something along the lines of, the party has no position in this primary, or something like that. At the end of the day, I started that meeting telling the executive committee that my job is to create a space where they can have a group discussion and come to a democratic resolution. And once they do that, I will go out and affect their will. And what they said pretty clearly was, we don't want an endorsement in this race. I do think it bears saying that these are the growing pains of a party that's gone from a party that's completely out of power to a party that wins more often than it loses, in fact, wins most often, in a very short period of time. And if you look at other cities like Columbus and Cleveland, these types of primaries are a lot more common. And I think going forward, we can expect more of it. I will say, same thing I said about precinct executives, which is these things have a way of splitting the family. Friends endorse one way or the other, and people feel very passionately about their candidates, and that leads to arguments and strained relationships. And so my caution to everybody is, please, if you have an opinion and you want to endorse a candidate, support them, do what you want to do to help them get elected. But don't put yourself in a position where you can't come back together after the primary, because whoever wins this primary is going to be our candidate for county commissioner, and we're going to need them to be a part of our team, and we're going to need to be a part of their team.
Greg, let me mention real quick, I spoke to the staff, and we should be good to at least 8:20 to 8:30, and I asked them to kick us out if we're staying too long.
So the restaurant talking too much. So the restaurant closes at 8. I wanted to be respectful of their time. I was going to say that we're beating up against 7:45, 7:50 here. So I want to take a couple questions from the audience if anyone has any questions, or we can kind of wrap it up with one more pre-planned question. So.
Not so much a question, Phil Crawford. We talked about, and you asked the question about those folks on the precinct plan. I would just encourage people to, seek them out, the website, attend it. The young folks, the progressive, as Alex said, they got a lot of energy. I think that's going to help this party, leveraging that sort of energy. And again, they're flying the sky, but they're young folks, right? And that's what we need. So I just want to just encourage folks, check them out there. They meet every week, every Friday, sort of move around a little bit. I'm not sure when the same location they were at last Friday, but they're out there on the website. Just Google it. I think that we say again. It's precinct plan. Yeah. Thank you.
So as Alex said, the precinct exec ends on tomorrow, right, February 4th. So I don't know if there'll be a meeting or not. But yeah, I went to one of the meetings too, and I thought it was pretty good. So
Yeah, I would want to meetings. We decided.
Yes, well.
I just have a question. Based on her previous job does she have advice for us about making our vote count this month?
So the question is, based on Zophia's previous job, does she have a recommendation for how to make our vote count?
So I used to manage the early vote center, and I would say vote as early as you possibly can. If you come in with an expired driver's license or the wrong kind of ID, you will have to vote provisionally. And that's just another layer of documentation that you have to fill out, that you can make a mistake on. So if you come and vote early, you see that your ID is expired, you have the entire month to come back and vote and make sure that your vote is cast. We have a really good system in place. Our vote center staff is trained very thoroughly, and they're doing that work the entire month. So they have a lot of expertise. We have supervisors on standby there. It's a really good way to just ensure that your vote is cast validly. Yeah, and I'm sure Alex has something to say about this too. Yep. Yes. So if you request your ballot by mail, you can also drop it off in our drop box. You can also bring it into the vote center, and we have a secure drop box in there as well. But the name of the game is that you want to vote as early as possible so that any barriers to voting, you are getting past.
So one of the changes this year for voting by mail is that your ballot has to be postmarked by Election Day, or has to be received by Election Day.
It has to be received on Election Day. So that
You used to have 4 extra days, right?
there's a whole history of this. So Republicans have been eating away at the time your ballot can return to the Board of Elections. 4 years ago, it was 10 days. So you have to postmark it the day before Election Day, as long as it's in the mail the day before Election Day. And the Board of Elections received it 10 days after Election Day, your ballot would count. 2 years ago, they cut that down to 4 days because Donald Trump told them to. It's that simple. And this year, they've cut it down to 0 days. So your ballot will not count unless it is in the Board of Elections at the end of the night on Election night. And so that is going to cause me to say something that I've never said to people before, which is, if we're inside 2 weeks to go of the election, don't vote by mail. If you have to vote by mail for practical reasons, make sure you do it early, and make sure you get it in the mail in that first week of early voting. But we've seen the post office has had its knees cut out from under it. It's dealing with funding cuts. It's dealing with system delays. His DeJoy character has not helped. He's made it worse. In the time, I previously was deputy director of elections. In the 4 years I did that job, the post office just got slower and slower every single year. You can't rely on the post office to get your ballot back in time, and the Republicans have made it even harder than ever. And there's legislation pending right now to eliminate drop boxes. So they're at it again. They love making it harder to vote. They are going to do it every time they can. Trump is desperate. He's telling them to change the rules in the middle of the game because he knows he's going to take a beating in this election. So the thing I encourage people, Zophia was the assistant manager of the Early Vote Center. The Early Vote Center in Hamilton County is the best early vote center in the country. And I say that objectively because it's award-winning. It is in other places in the country where they have DeKalb County in Georgia made headlines during the presidential election because they had really long lines at their early vote centers. In Georgia, they're allowed to have multiple early vote centers per county. So in DeKalb, there are 6 early vote centers. It's the same population as Hamilton County, but they have 6 early vote centers spread throughout the county. Could you imagine if we had that? In Ohio, we're only allowed to have 1 early vote center. So that forces us to become very efficient. And so in Hamilton County, we can process 800 voters an hour, which is incredible. If you've ever been there, you see even when there's a long line, the line is moving very fast. There's not a vote center in the country. That DeKalb County one that made headlines, they're processing 60 voters an hour. So we are, I used to go to conferences when I was deputy director and talk about how we manage our early vote center, because we really are looked at throughout the nation as a model for that one. And so that's why I tell people, you want it to count, go early, because you never know what's going to happen on election day. You can't count on the mail. Go to the early vote center, and make sure you get a sample ballot on your organ.
Oh, well, you kind of already answered it, but I was just wondering, them getting rid of the 4-day grace period for absentee ballot, what demographic does that tend to hurt the most?
So by the Republicans getting rid of the 4-day grace period, what demographic would that impact the most?
There are 3 groups of people that are heavy users of vote by mail. The elderly, military, and college students. And those are the 3 people who are hurt the most by that. And it's the very young, it's the very old, and it's the people serving in our armed services. And why Republicans think that they don't deserve a chance to vote, you got to ask them.
I thought I saw one last hand back there. So.
Quick question. My husband and I have been poll workers for the last few years. The last election, there was no one passing out a Democratic slate. And would we be more useful to do that at the precinct, or continue to be poll workers at the precinct?
So the question is that you've worked in the polls. We talked in the back of the room before when you walked in. So you've worked the polls for 18 years.
No, not yet.
That's a number of years.
Number of years, okay. And so her question is, would it be better off to help the voter by working inside the poll or passing out the slate cards outside the polls?
And I think the question is a little more than that. There was not a Democratic person out there passing out a sample ballot, but there was Republicans out there.
My answer.
Big precinct for precincts. So what a missed opportunity.
My answer is going to depend on which part of the town are you in.
Coleraine Township.
Coleraine Township. So let me say this. We need good people to be poll workers. Serving as a poll worker is very difficult. It's a long day. You don't make a lot of money doing it, but it's so important to have good people inside of polling locations. Coleraine Township, we need volunteers more. I would rather volunteer for the party and hand out sample ballots for sure. Yeah, because Coleraine is a growth opportunity for us, and it's one where we're trying to build an organization. But it's still in its infancy, getting off the ground. Yeah, we have a lot of gaps in Coleraine. So, also, if you want to run for precinct executive, okay. Can't blame it back for trying.
Great work to me, but I want it.
So you have Carrie and.
I just want to share with you that all the meetings I'm going to around here, what I'm doing is bringing. I bought a bunch of thank you cards. And I'm letting people sign the cards, maybe write a little love note, and I'm going to put them all in a big envelope and send it to Minnesota. I think we, as a political party, people running for office, and for the sake of our country, Minnesota has done something tremendous, and we're all going to be standing on their shoulders. And I just thought it would be nice. So if you have the time before you leave, you want to, sign a little card. I'll give it to them for you all within the next couple of weeks.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And one last question.
So my question kind of has 2 parts. The first part is, as far as the Cincinnati Precinct project goes, I've kind of picked up on some conversation that there's been some pushback from the Democratic Party about the project. And I think even when you said something, you were like, oh, that's fine. And I'm wondering why there's not a lot more enthusiasm from the Democratic Party. That somebody took the time to go start a grassroots movement and that it's gaining traction and that there's not more excitement. To piggyback off of that, I know that in the spring when they do the gala, the fundraiser, and I understand that fundraisers have to raise money, but thinking about the grassroots base, you know, when the lowest ticket is $250 per person, it kind of sends a message that everyday Americans who might not be able to afford that are not welcome and that they're not going to be part of the democratic leadership process. So I'm just wondering about your thoughts on those two things.
Yeah, well, you know, first I think you heard me say that energy is a good thing, right? Yeah. You know, and you know, the precinct project, the one thing, you know, that I would be a little critical about is not checking with us as to whether or not we've got somebody in the spot that's like really good at doing the work. And so we're going to have some like long-time activists who have been involved in building the movement in this community who are going to face challenges. And you know, I'm not going to tell anybody not to run because, like I said, we've got to go through this as a party. But I want to make sure that the people who have done the job for a long time, and so, you know, I think where you've detected some anxiety is because of that. It's because, you know, longtime party activists are finding themselves challenged and they're defensive and they're uncomfortable. And I understand that. I understand why they're defensive and uncomfortable. You know, with regard to the gala is a fundraiser, and we use it to raise most of our operating budget for the entire year. Now, we are often find ourselves with generous donors who are willing to sponsor tickets to the gala. And we do make an effort to, when we get closer to the gala, there are many of our donors who will say, I'll buy a whole table, and we create sort of a wait list for members of the Democratic clubs, our Young Democrats, and folks like that, so that they can attend that event. But at the end of the day, you know, I can't apologize for raising money for this party. We hold a number of events throughout the year that are low or no barrier to entry. And in fact, I have stressed to our clubs that we need to do more no barrier to entry events. That's the one in the year that's pretty expensive, but it's also the biggest fundraiser for the party.
Well, and IGI used for multiple nonprofit fundraising activities because I tend to advocate for people on the lower part of the ladder. And what I've always done is given them the opportunity to earn points that pay for their tickets. Because just like you said to this young lady, that her volunteer work outside the poll is actually more valuable than what she's doing inside. And I think you're absolutely correct. We need the workers at the polls, giving out the literature, canvassing, and if you create a point system, and you might even be able to use it as a fundraising mechanism to give back to the base, you know, and get B&Gs to sponsor more this way. And then this way they have a way of attending any event by earning points. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting idea.
Through their work, and then we're getting the benefit, and we're being more, we're leading by example when we say inclusiveness. We're finding a way to include others who might not be able to afford it.
And by the way, P&G doesn't cut checks to the Democratic Party.
Pardon me?
The P&G doesn't cut checks to the Democratic Party. Most of the big donors to that event are statewide and countywide candidates for office and labor unions. But
just real quick to clarify, you said that sometimes people will buy tables and you'll offer them to certain people. What's that process? Like, how do you decide?
Call me on Monday, I'll put your name on the list.
It's literally this guy.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I lean on the ward chairs for this kind of thing. Like when I get, you know, I'm trying to be a little bit more intentional about it. It's been a little haphazard before I was chair, but you know, I'm going to basically sort of keep a list, and so I'm going to say to the ward chairs, like, who's out there who you know who would want to come to this but couldn't necessarily afford a ticket. So that'll generate kind of a waiting list, and as I get donated tickets, I'm just going to move down.
Okay. Just real quick, what about having a sliding scale for your PDs and people that work on the Democratic, slates, and do like, 25 bucks to 100. And that way you're still making money. It's not $250, but
Yeah.
at least you get, I don't know, maybe 25 people say, hey, I can afford 25 bucks, and you get that money.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea too. Here's last year, we had our gala at the Graduate Hotel down in Clifton. We were kind of constrained by the size of the room. We sold out 3 weeks out, and so it was really like, I want to maximize the value for each ticket. But, I hadn't really thought about this until you just said that, but this year we moved to the convention center because we need more space because we sold out so fast last year. And now we kind of have unlimited space, so that pressure isn't on us as much. So it is a really great idea. Maybe next year though.
Well, thank you all for coming, and I want to thank Zophia and Alex for coming. Thank you very much for all the information, and I think we all enjoyed it, and